The X-Men are no ordinary beings. They're capable of punching down walls, outthinking actual sentient islands, and even rebuilding entire timelines, all before breakfast. You could say it's like another Tuesday for the team. However, every so often, mutants go far beyond their usual call of duty. Sometimes a mutant will not just get stronger, they'll become so powerful that people look at them as though they're gods. We're going to look at mutants who have been regarded as gods by their respective people, or whose stories genuinely frame them as divine or godlike. These are mutants who have been worshipped in some form, given divine titles, admitted into supernatural hierarchies, or granted powers that place them on the level of cosmic beings. Some have held divine positions for extended periods, such as magic on the throne of Limbo. Others have experienced only brief moments of godhood, like Darwin's one-issue transformation into a death deity. They can also be mutants like Rachel Summers and Hope Summers, who, although not literal gods, became near-sacred figures whose actions determined the future of mutant kind. So today, we're going to examine the feats and accomplishments of each of these mutants and detail exactly what happened in their stories that made them appear godlike. These selections are based on whether a mutant was granted godlike powers, received a divine title, was worshipped, joined a supernatural order, or was explicitly framed by the story as having attained godhood. The mutants we'll be talking about aren't necessarily the most powerful mutants, but rather the ones whose stories brought them closest to divinity. With that out of the way, let's meet a mutant some of you may be familiar with. 1. Jean Grey. Let's not forget that even before gaining cosmic power, Jean was one of the original X-Men, a highly potent telekinetic and telepath, but still a mortal mutant. Then the Phoenix Saga begins in Uncanny X-Men number 101, eventually leading into the Dark Phoenix Saga, which concludes in issue number 137. And soon, Human stops feeling like a sufficient description for what she becomes. And if you don't know about the Phoenix Force, it isn't just a power booster. It's a cosmic entity associated with life, death, rebirth, and the psychic energy of creation. The kind of terrifying power capable of consuming stars and manipulating matter on a cosmic scale. During the original Phoenix storyline, the Force took Jean's form and believed itself to be her while the real Jean remained in a healing cocoon. Later stories established a much deeper and more permanent connection between Jean and the Phoenix. After the Phoenix adopts Jean's identity, the comics stop holding back its genuine capacity. Consumed by its darker impulses, Dark Phoenix devours the star of the Debari system, causing the deaths of billions of inhabitants on a nearby planet. This is what makes the Shi'ar intervene. They view the Phoenix as a cosmic threat and demand that it be destroyed before it can consume another civilization. Setting aside the tragedy of it all, at its core, what you have in those pages is Jean's identity and power becoming fused with a cosmic entity capable of godlike actions. And it's worth noting that this is not an experiment Marvel conducted, regretted, and completely abandoned. The Phoenix Force consistently finds its way back to Jean and other hosts because a cosmic entity capable of reshaping reality has become a permanent part of X-Men mythology. 2. Storm, Hadari Yao of Wakanda. Storm's godhood is not merely an allegory, although it is more complicated than saying she permanently became a conventional deity. When Aurora Monroe was a young woman, long before Professor X recruited her, communities in Africa worshipped her as a rain goddess because of her extraordinary weather-controlling powers. That's a part of her classic origin, but a more modern development occurs in Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther run. In Wakanda, Storm becomes known as Hadari Yao, meaning Walker of Clouds, and the faith of the Wakandan people allows her to access immense mystical power against the adversary. She is treated as a genuine goddess by her worshippers and draws power from their belief, placing her alongside the divine traditions of Wakanda. However, the comics don't consistently establish that she permanently joined the Orisha as an ordinary member of their pantheon. Her divine status instead rests on a combination of inherited mystical potential, worship, mutant power, and the ability to channel faith as real supernatural energy. Few other X-Men receive such an enduring association with divinity. Storm's godhood is not simply a one-time transformation. It's a recurring part of how communities perceive her and how her spiritual potential manifests. This also puts her in select company. While many mutants on this list reach godlike status through a single cosmic event, Storm's deification unfolds over time through her ancestry, her power, her leadership, and the faith of the people who worship her. 3. Dani Moonstar, Valkyrie of Asgard. Dani Moonstar was born with mutant powers that initially allowed her to create images of other people's greatest fears. She also endured the kind of difficult childhood most people would spend their lives trying to overcome, but there was nothing divine about her origin. However, the New Mutants eventually traveled to Asgard, and when it came time to go home, things became cosmic. Dani found a wounded winged horse in the wilderness and named him Brightwind. Brightwind chose Dani as his rider, and that bond made her part of the Valkyrior, Asgard's supernatural shield maidens who guide worthy fallen warriors to the afterlife. She gained the ability to perceive the danger of death surrounding people and could sometimes resist or interfere with death's claim over them. This is not a metaphor for intuition. It's an actual supernatural office recruiting a mutant teenager. Dani later lost her Valkyrie connection for a time, but regained it after making a bargain with Hela and returning to the service of the Valkyrior. She hasn't generally been called an actual goddess of death, but she has repeatedly served as one of the supernatural warriors responsible for guiding the dead. One of the many things that differentiates Dani is that her ascent into divine ranks happened without anyone building altars for her. The right girl met the right horse at the right time and was appointed to a prestigious role within Asgard's supernatural order. 4. Selene, the dark goddess of Necrotia. For millennia before her story was ever told, Selene Gallio had been attempting to attain divinity. It's in Necrotia, the 2009 to 2010 crossover between X-Force, New Mutants, and X-Men Legacy, that she finally comes tantalizingly close. Using her servant Eli Bard and a modified strain of Technarch techno-organic virus, Selene resurrects millions of dead mutants, including many of those killed during the destruction of Genosha. But this isn't driven by kindness. It's fueled by an avaricious plan. On Genosha, which she renames Necrotia, she intends to drain the life energy and souls of the resurrected mutants in one enormous ritual. Selene successfully completes the ceremony, absorbs the energy of the dead, and becomes the Dark Goddess. In this form, she's ultimately killed by Warpath, who uses a mystically empowered dagger created for that purpose. It's a short and brutal moment, but within its confines, Selene isn't merely imitating a god. The story explicitly presents her as having become one. The circumstances of her godhood differ from those of many individuals on this list. Most gain it accidentally, while others have divine powers conferred upon them. Selene actively works at becoming a god, devising a mass sacrifice ritual for the single-minded pursuit of her lifelong objective. Necrotia isn't a startling twist of fate, it's a horrifying fulfillment of her desired outcome. 5. Darwin, a god of death for one issue. Darwin's entire power set is adaptation. His body automatically transforms to help him survive threats, usually by developing protective skin, new senses, energy absorption, or some other biological defense. X-Factor number 212, scripted by Peter David, takes that ability one step further. While the team's in Las Vegas dealing with Hela and trying to rescue Pip the Troll, Darwin places himself between the Asgardian death goddess and Multiple Man. It appears Darwin's mutation adapts to Hela's death magic because, instead of dying, he transforms into a death godlike being capable of challenging her authority. He takes on a form resembling Hela and turns her undead forces against her. It can't last forever, and his mutation eventually returns him to normal, but Darwin briefly becomes something powerful enough to threaten a goddess in her own supernatural domain. He probably deserves more attention because it's easy to overlook Darwin. Most of the time, his powers amount to don't die by becoming durable, or survive by developing exactly the right ability. But in X Factor number 212, his mutation doesn't simply make him resistant to death, it makes him powerful enough to contest the being trying to claim him. 6. Iceman, Loki's God-tier upgrade. It's true, Bobby Drake has been part of the X-Men from the very beginning, appearing in X-Men number 1, and he was relegated to the role of the Joker and little brother of the original 5 for years. Marvel's Voices Iceman, a 2022 Infinity comic, gave Iceman a truly legendary moment. The story teamed Bobby with Loki against a monstrous enemy that adopted the appearance of Bobby's late, deeply homophobic father. With Bobby struggling to access his powers effectively, Loki handed him a ceremonial crown and scepter, claiming that they would provide a frost giant enhancement and allow him to focus his abilities. The ensuing confrontation, with Bobby wearing enormous Asgardian-style ice armor and pulverizing the monster into frozen debris, was epic, and helped him confront the pain connected to his father. But that's where it gets interesting. In the story's closing moments, Loki admitted that the objects had not actually granted Bobby any additional power. The supposedly boosted strength, armor, and godlike ice abilities had been Bobby's all along. All he needed was for the God of Mischief to trick him into believing he could access them. This final twist is what makes the story such a bold statement. Iceman is officially classified as an Omega-level mutant because the upper limit of his temperature manipulation can't be meaningfully measured. His story became one about one of Marvel's longest underestimated heroes discovering that the supposedly divine power he needed had already existed within him. 7. Wolverine gained godlike power, then gave it up. Most of this list is about mutants who receive divine power and keep or pursue it. This entry is about a mutant who briefly gained nearly unlimited power and immediately used it to destroy the source. During the adventure in Uncanny X-Men Annual number 11, the X-Men became trapped in Horde's Citadel while searching for the Crystal of Ultimate Vision. The Citadel tempted its visitors with illusions of their deepest desires, encouraging them to abandon their mission and surrender to perfect fantasy. Some of the X-Men gave in temporarily. Rogue and Longshot became absorbed in the illusions, while Horde brutally attacked the remaining team. Wolverine continued crawling towards the crystal even after Horde tore out his heart and killed him. When Logan's blood touched the crystal, it resurrected him and granted him godlike power. Wolverine used that power to destroy Horde, restore his teammates, and then destroy the crystal because he recognized that no one should possess such limitless power. Logan stands out as one of the few characters willing to give up near omnipotence rather than risk allowing it to corrupt him or fall into the wrong hands. In a world where many mutants desperately want what they were denied, Wolverine rejected a power capable of granting almost anything. While most mutants on this list earned their place after gaining something, Wolverine earned his by receiving a godlike power and choosing not to keep it. 8. Magic, sorceress and ruler of Limbo. To be honest, this is a grim backstory, especially since young Illyana Rasputin was kidnapped into Limbo by the demon lord Belasco, who spent years molding her with dark magic and trying to corrupt her as thoroughly as possible. She not only refused to break, she also subverted his entire operation. By using part of her life force and soul, she created the Soul Sword, which became the physical expression of her magical power. She then defeated Belasco and drove the demon who abused her from his throne. Afterwards, instead of simply escaping, Illyana became the ruler of Limbo and one of its most powerful sorcerers, commanding both the dark magic taught by Belasco and the white magic she learned from an alternate version of Storm. Inside Limbo, Sorceress Ruler of a Demon Dimension and Hell Lord come down to roughly the same job. She governed its demons, controlled its magic, and exercised power there that made many of her abilities on Earth look like a warm-up. Years later, she eventually stepped down from Limbo's throne and transferred control of the realm to Madeline Pryor. But for a significant period, the teenage X-Man ruled a Hell dimension. The thing that sets her apart from the others on this list is that her godlike abilities grew from the worst experience of her life. Belasco's abuse was intended to force her into servitude. Instead, it gave her the knowledge and power necessary to take his throne. 9. Vulcan, Emperor of the Shi'ar. The previously unknown Summers brother appeared in the 2006 miniseries X-Men Deadly Genesis, where it was revealed that he had been taken from his mother before birth by the Shi'ar, and artificially aged and raised as a slave before eventually escaping to Earth. By the time the rise and fall of the Shi'ar Empire storyline begins in Uncanny X-Men number 475, Vulcan has set out to take revenge against the Empire. He allies himself with Deathbird and restores the shattered mind of her brother, the deposed Emperor Deacon. Vulcan marries Deathbird, then kills Deacon during the wedding ceremony and proclaims himself Emperor of the Shi'ar, an actual galactic empire governing planets across numerous star systems. Vulcan remains Shi'ar Emperor throughout Emperor Vulcan and into War of Kings, becoming a cosmic despot ruling over billions until his destructive confrontation with the inhuman king Black Bolt. He began this arc as a presumed dead and almost completely forgotten former X-Man before elevating himself into a godlike political figure who commanded an interstellar civilization. It's legitimately one of the most improbable ascents in X-Men history. Vulcan doesn't build respect slowly or grow organically into the role. He goes from the equivalent of a forgotten teammate to Galactic Emperor with terrifying speed, using his Omega-level energy manipulation and ruthless ambition to force an entire empire beneath him. 10. Legion, the God Mutant. David Haller doesn't wield just one power. His mind contains numerous distinct personalities, and many of those personalities possess their own mutant abilities. Depending on which persona is active, David can display telepathy, telekinesis, reality manipulation, time alteration, energy control, and countless other powers. That virtually limitless potential is one reason Magic called him the God Mutant. This isn't completely hyperbolic. David rewrote history when he traveled into the past, intending to kill Magneto, accidentally killed his own father, Professor Xavier, and created the Age of Apocalypse timeline. During Nightcrawlers, one of the distorted futures created during Sins of Sinister, an elderly version of David grew tired of the material universe and attempted to lead his followers into a higher plane of existence. The attempted ascension was presented in religious and apocalyptic terms, although it went catastrophically wrong. David Haller never needed worshippers, never cared to wear a crown, and never built an empire. He is one of the few mutants whose power has repeatedly been described in explicitly divine terms because his mind contains enough abilities to reshape reality itself. That's what makes him eligible for this list. Where others have temples and altars, Legion has a title bestowed by Magic, a mystical ruler who understands the difference between an ordinary mutant and something dangerously close to a god. 11. Rachel Summers, Mother Ascani. Rachel Summers comes from the dystopian Days of Future Past timeline and is the daughter of that world's Scott Summers and Jean Grey. Rachel was later drawn into the distant future, where Apocalypse ruled and Nathan Summers was destined to become one of the greatest threats to his reign. As Mother Ascani, Rachel founded or inspired the Ascani, a revolutionary movement dedicated to opposing Apocalypse. They regarded her as their spiritual leader and followed teachings and prophecies connected to the coming of the Ascani's son, a warrior destined to challenge Apocalypse. That savior was Nathan Summers, the future Cable. Rachel arranged for Scott Summers and Jean Grey's minds to be brought into the future so they could raise Nathan while she worked behind the scenes to prepare him for his destiny. She was never formally placed on a divine throne or admitted into a pantheon like an Asgardian deity. But remove the superhero elements, and what remains is the founder and spiritual center of a resistance movement whose followers treat her teachings as sacred. It's also one of the stranger trajectories in a history filled with time-traveling X-Men. A mutant from one destroyed future becomes the guiding figure of another civilization centuries later, simply because she remains unwilling to give up the fight against Apocalypse. 12. Hope Summers, the Mutant Messiah. When Scarlet Witch depowered the vast majority of the mutant population during M-Day, Hope Summers became the first new mutant born afterwards, and nearly every major faction in the Marvel Universe treated her birth as a prophetic event from the moment she appeared in Messiah Complex. She became known as the Mutant Messiah, predestined either to save mutant kind or cause the disastrous future Bishop wanted to prevent. What everyone agreed on was that she was anything but an ordinary baby. Messiah Complex set the stage on a massive level. Later, in Avengers vs. X-Men, the Phoenix Force traveled towards Earth because of its connection to Hope, triggering a conflict between the Avengers and the X-Men over how to handle her destiny. The two teams couldn't agree on whether they should protect Hope from the Phoenix, train her to receive it, or prevent the cosmic entity from reaching her at all. Hope eventually became the White Phoenix. Together with Scarlet Witch, she dispersed the Phoenix Force and reversed the effects of Scarlet Witch's No More Mutants spell, allowing new mutants to be born again. Hope Summers may not have had a permanent religion built in her honor or been crowned queen, but two armies went to war over her fate, and she altered the destiny of an entire species. You only need to compare her with Rachel Summers to see how different this kind of symbolic godhood can be. Rachel gradually became the spiritual leader of the Eskani. Hope was called a messiah before she could even crawl, and her entire narrative focused on a girl trying to survive the unbearable weight of a destiny she never asked for. And that's 12 mutants. 12 wildly different journeys towards the same point. Power and influence too enormous for a label like mutant to fully contain. Some are connected to cosmic forces, like Jean Grey. Some receive genuine worship or supernatural appointments, like Storm and Danny. Some deliberately pursue dark godhood and rule supernatural realms, like Selene and Magic. Some reach God Emperor or reality warping status, like Vulcan and Legion. Rachel and Hope Summers never receive conventional divine crowns, but entire civilizations and species place their futures in their hands. And then there's Wolverine, standing in the middle of the godlike power everyone else is trying to achieve, handed a version of it and simply refusing to keep it. The real truth here is how easily mutant crosses the line into God in the Marvel Universe. Nearly every transformation on this list is a concept Marvel could revisit at any time. So I'll pose this to the comments. Of these 12 mutants, who truly deserves a legitimate God-level story? And who among them should receive an animated or live-action adaptation first? Let me know in the comments below. And that's all for today. Don't forget to like and share the video with your friends, and of course, subscribe to our channel for more interesting content. I'll see you in the next one.